everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa Dickens, co-founder of Ellen Mulry and board director of the UKPA, and I shall be your weekly host. Each week for 30 minutes, we'll be connecting the VCs, prop tech startups, and real estate professionals globally, and assist in bridging that famous communication gap we all love talking about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Propcast Season 3. Today, we are fortunate enough to be joined by founder of Homelight, Dustin Figuet. So welcome, Dustin.
Thanks, Lisa. Looking forward to the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. You're joining us from sort of Germany. And for those who are listening, here's a little bit of background to Dustin. So in 2015, Dustin and Christoph Kasper founded Homelight, which is the leading marketplace to book furnished business apartments entirely online. But prior to Homelight, he successfully co-founded the HR startup Talents Connect and worked as an executive assistant to the CEO of Arvato. Now, Dustin has also spent 2 years working in Silicon Valley. Through long-term work experiences in China, Spain, and the US, Dustin sort of quickly learned about the pitfalls of the highly offline long-term housing market, which eventually led to the founding of Homelight. Now, for those who haven't heard of Homelight, which I'd be very surprised if you haven't, I think it's the largest online marketplace for long-term furnished apartment rentals for business travelers. And they provide a best-in-class booking experience for high-quality apartments for up to 30 nights and more from professional landlords. They help people who are executives, professionals, expats, consultants, trainees from all around the world to find, the most appropriate and best accommodation quickly and conveniently online, which is, I guess, what we're all looking for. And from someone who I did a lot of traveling before we went to lockdown, this is something which, I could have personally definitely used rather than these super expensive, not homely hotel costs I face. But Homelight's mission is to build the number one marketplace for corporate housing and help business travelers and travel arrangements from around the world find long-term accommodation quickly and conveniently. So I guess after that sort of brief introduction, Dustin, let's actually hear from you, a little bit more about Homelight sort of came about. So over to you.
Yeah, it was a pretty on-point description about what we are doing. So back in 2014, and at that time I was living in San Francisco on my expatriate assignment with Alvaro Bertelsmann. We actually came up with the idea: travel managers in large corporate organizations, executive assistants, they're doing a lot for the employees when it comes to short-term stays. So booking a hotel, booking flights, even airport pickups, so on and so forth. And then we said, what are corporate organizations doing for the expatriates? So for people who really need accommodation for a couple of months or even years. So expats, but also like consultants being on a project for 3 to 6 months. And then we kind of dig a little bit deeper into the market, and we learned that this market at that time, and it still is to a large degree, very offline driven. So those corporate organizations, there are many expats out there, and a lot of people actually looking for temporary housing, which is defined by minimum of 1 month stay. It's a $180 billion market.
That's mental. It's huge.
Yeah, they're using offline agencies, so brokers. So they literally go kind of like in a brokerage firm. Then they see like all the different apartment options. Then they do viewing. So it's a very offline driven process. The entire payment is done offline. The rental agreement signature is done offline. Sometimes, or in most of the cases, the availabilities are not right. So you don't have transparency about the apartment choices. And when it then comes to a pan-European or global platform where you also can have access to properties in various regions, you need to have kind of like different local brokerage firms, so actually a network of brokerage firms in order to find the perfect property. So this was back in 2014. And in the beginning, the idea was actually a little bit different. So the first idea we had was to allow brokers to list on a platform where they can actually put the inventory. So basically classified ad platform for furnished apartment. But then very shortly, we kind of like understood that we were able to get direct access to the property managers and the property owners. And then we thought about, okay, why should we even have someone as an intermediate in the process? So why are we not owning the entire process? And that was back in 2014, we bootstrapped the company then for about a year. So we actually didn't get any fundraising the first 12 months because we wanted to build the product first and really prove that this model is working. And then back in 2015, we launched in February, and then we got our first investment round. And since then, we have been growing the platform to now around 65,000 furnished apartments in 9 countries and 400 cities.
Oh, wow. And I guess as being sort of founder and sort of MD, how's it been, this whole sort of transition and growing this business across these countries?
Yeah, it's a very, very exciting thing to do. And I think especially a lot of the founders, and maybe also some listening to this podcast, when you have an idea and you say, okay, I'm going to build the next unicorn business, that's where like a lot of founders actually starting it when they have like an idea. I think the way until becoming unicorn, it's like an uphill and downhill all the time. It's and the last 7 months, I think for most industries and for most companies has been like one of this kind of like holes where you just like need to have very, very different skills, right, to grow the business maybe when COVID is then gone. I think for me personally, it's the best thing in my life to be a founder, because you can really challenge the status quo and you can disrupt existing user experiences in that case and actually take advantage of technology and product. But also the flip side of things is that you assign most of your time, most of your daytime and even night times to build the business. And I think it's very similar also for you building your business, right? It's like a lot of dedication, and you need to have a lot of love and passion for what you do. And I think what's great about Homelike that we are still as excited as we were the first day when we came about this idea. Obviously, challenges are quite different today than they were actually 5 years ago. 5 years ago, we didn't even know to build a technology business, right? And now it's kind of like we have a very sophisticated technical backbone. And now it's more about kind of like adding features, doing A/B tests, taking a look into data. So it's a very, very different company now. And I'm happy that's a different company because it also shows progress. But I think it's really important to understand like founding a business is probably not something for everyone. But for me, and also speaking for my co-founder, Christoph, for us, it's the best thing to do.
I think, well, you've definitely come a long way in 9 countries and the space of sort of 5 years. It's sort of pretty impressive. And going back to what you said, you've got to have, I guess, advice you've just given to sort of new founders. Obviously, you've got to have passion for your product. But I think the biggest thing, which I personally learned, and I presume you and your co-founder will agree, is resilience, especially in the past 8 to 9 months. When did you see the market opportunity? But also, how has this sort of changed due to sort of COVID?
It's a great question. So when we started, we knew that the market is really, really big. We didn't know at that time that the market is as big as we know today, because when we started out the business, when you also pitch Homelike to friends who don't know the market and probably have never lived abroad, the first thing they say is, "Oh, that's interesting for consulting." And then you say, "Yeah, I agree." And then you ask, "Okay, which other target customers do you see?" And then they say, "Oh, maybe expatriates," but then they stop. And if you really think about what the use cases are for midterm furnished apartments, it's actually going from nurses, pilots during Corona, people who want to put themselves into self-isolation, home remodeling, even models, soccer clubs, entertainment companies, film production firms. I mean, it's a long, long list of different use cases, right? Trainees, for example, new hires, so on and so forth. And then when you add all the cases, you really get kind of the real picture of the market size. What happened during COVID, which was quite interesting, I remember in Europe, it was the 13th of March, where things actually fell off the cliff in a sense of overnight. It was kind of like a new environment, a new world you need to deal with. And you mentioned a very interesting aspect, which is resilience, right? And at this point, it was a question, how resilient is our market against COVID, also compared to any other industry, right? Well, it was pretty clear in the beginning that some industry will probably benefit from the situation, but was also very clear to investors that everything related to travel will probably not benefit. And therefore, kind of like everyone put us into the basket, okay, Homelike will be highly affected. And it obviously was in the first couple of weeks. So at the peak time of Corona, we still were able to manage 50% of our pre-COVID revenues. And when you compare that to the short stay industry, we were actually able to kind of maintain a very, very high share. There were companies in the short stay industry who lost 95 or even more % of their business basically overnight. Yeah. What happened after that, so after March, every single month, we were able to grow at least 25% month over month until today. And we now reached 2019 numbers. So we kind of like almost rebounded and recovered completely. And there are a lot of things which actually affected that. Some were created by ourselves in terms of product innovations we did. For example, we added flexible cancellation policies. We added enhanced hygiene standards. We worked more about kind of like transparent communication about the Corona situation in all the different destinations. We worked a lot on customer care. We even added people on the customer care side in order to deal with all the upcoming tickets and customer requests. We worked a lot with suppliers because they were reaching out and saying, hey, I lost a lot of my business. What can I do? And we have a very, very great data team and a lot of access to data. So we could actually help them. What are the prices you can set now in order to get like the traction with the demand, which is still in the market, so on and so forth. So there was a lot of like personal staff involved in order to help like our two groups, as we are marketplace, which is the corporate client and the business traveler, but on the other side, all the different suppliers. And this was very interesting to see. And we have obviously also talked with a lot of our investors. We have a very, very great board, also like one investor from the US and the rest from Europe. So we were able to see kind of like the bigger global picture. And obviously all investors said focuses on cash, but also helping your customers to really survive through this crisis. And we put this entire COVID situation, and I remember our first leadership meeting, which was on the 14th of March, where we put everyone into one virtual conference room. And we said, we see this Corona situation as an opportunity for our business. So we called it never waste a crisis. And this is still something we do today. So we try to take Corona as an opportunity. And I think the last 6-7 months have actually shown that Corona can also be a great opportunity for furnished apartments and also mega trends like flexible working, remote working, so on and so forth. I think all of that is supporting what we are doing.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've been very proactive and extremely reactive with all the changes you've made in your sort of product, and great to see, I guess, your growth still. I mean, not many other businesses in your space have managed to come out of this and also come out almost better. So I guess congratulations in order there. Is there, say, looking at, I guess, post-COVID, not that we're completely post-COVID, but I touch wood, we're through the probably worst or maybe the most sort of shocking or unknown phase. Is there any sort of trends you're sort of seeing from your customers so far? Obviously, they're looking for more support, which you're giving to them since those high, extra hires, investments you've made in that space. Is there any other trends you've seen maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. As I was saying earlier, I think one very interesting trend is flexibility when it comes to booking furnished apartments. Before that, we obviously had cancellation policies, so on and so forth. But due to the very high degree of uncertainty now, we see our customers really enjoying the fact that a lot of our properties have flexible cancellation policies. Actually, 35% of our supply has complete flexible cancellation policies where you're even allowed to cancel your booking 24 hours before you move in. So that's definitely a trend I also believe will be a lasting trend. So it will not disappear because people are just becoming more aware of the fact that Corona can, or new kind of like COVID risk enforcement can also like change how you're allowed to travel or not. So that's one thing. The second thing, which is interesting, we started mid of last year with instant booking. So as I said in the beginning, this market used to be very, very offline driven with a lot of hand holding and kind of like manual touch points. And we are believing in technology being the enabler for an instant booking experience also when it comes to longer term stays. So we started in 2019, and in 2019, we had about 15% of our transactions being instant. And this kind of like accelerated a lot throughout Corona. I can't give you the exact numbers here, but it's a large portion of our transactions are now done entirely instant. And we do believe that one of the reasons why this is happening is, first of all, due to the lockdowns, people were not able to go into the brokerage firms in order to do viewings whatsoever. And we had the technology already in place and we were able to double down on that one. So that's kind of like a second trend we are seeing. The third one is, and I think that's very obvious, is hygiene standards. So really making sure that when you travel and when you book a furnished apartment, that you have all the hygiene standards in place, which are necessary in order to prevent you getting an infection of COVID. That's probably like a third thing. And the fourth thing, I think COVID has been, as I said, on the mega trend of flexible working. Now kind of like sees a re-innovation of what means furnished apartments. Furnished apartments and long-term apartments has always been not under the radar, therefore the market is too large, but everyone has always been talking about short-term stays and leisure, so on and so forth. And now kind of like furnished apartments, more resilient than short stays. That's also the reason why a lot of suppliers are now kind of like getting into the long stay apartment market. But even business travelers thinking about, hey, when I'm not required to be in the office any longer, why do I not stay for 3 months in Hamburg and for 5 months in London and for 7 months in Barcelona where I can do my work? So these are kind of like all trends we do believe will also change the way how people will be working going forward. Don't know what your experience is with the companies you have talked in your podcast with, but this flexible working thing will change how we see furnished apartments and probably also like add a lot of acceleration and digitization in this space.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's just with my clients. I think it's even with my friends who are young professionals who are all revisiting, you know, like you said, where they are going to be living. And for lots of businesses that are expanding to different countries, what better way than to actually immerse yourself for, you know, a month or two and get to know the city? And people are now a lot more open to doing client meetings. So if you're there and say, whether it's New York to say Germany, having that base for a month or two where you can do that, limit this sort of risk, I think it's a really healthy alternative, which, well, I'm not surprised it's been sort of an uptake in that. That's something which, for us who are expanding across different cities in the US and the Europe, we are looking at doing that with all our consultants as well. Is there, you're in 9 countries, was there a particular sort of market you found difficult entering? And, you know, I guess with different government regulations, you know, how did you overcome this?
Yeah, I think being compliant with legal regulations by country or even by state is one of the USPs we have. So before we expand into new markets, we want to understand the legal requirements, and we need to understand that because we work with 2 kinds of apartment providers. One, which are more from the service apartments side, which usually don't need a rental agreement, which needs to be signed. These are more terms and conditions, right? So when you book on leisure travel platforms, for example, you don't need to sign for your vacation a rental agreement. You just accept terms and conditions. But there's another group of suppliers more from the residential real estate side. And when you book with them, you are obliged to sign a rental agreement. And in order to be able to do the online signature procedure through our booking system, we need to issue the rental agreement. Even though we are not responsible for the content, we need to understand which regulations are in any given city, state, country, so on and so forth. So therefore, we have a lot of knowledge in all the 9 markets where we are operating, how the legal situation when it comes to midterm stays is actually in those territories. So therefore, yes, there is a lot of difference across country. And there's also probably a reason for that. It would be easier if there would be just like one rental agreement which can be applied throughout the world, but that's not the case. But we have actually technology in place where we are able to even give you a rental agreement when you move into a residential property in London in different languages. So this is a technology we have been building over the last 4 to 5 years.
Also, if everything was that easy, then you wouldn't have got the satisfaction that hopefully you're feeling after all this, I guess, achievement you've had across Europe. Now, I guess I'm fairly clueless this. You know, I'd love to know, what's the sort of difference in cost between, say, I guess it depends what hotel you're staying at, but say the average hotel, you know, we're not talking about Four Seasons, and say renting, you know, one of your homes, you know, each month. What's the sort of difference? It must be sort of, not only are there so many more benefits to it, but like if we're looking at sort of the economics of it, you know, what's the cost difference roughly?
Yeah, it depends, as you said, on a lot of factors. And one is obviously if you go into a 5-star hotel, you can't compare that with kind of like a lower budget furnished apartment, right? But if you just like have like an average hotel and an average furnished apartment, the rule of thumb is about that you save 30 to 40%. But also the longer you stay, the more you save, because we have a lot of suppliers. When you stay longer than 6 months, for example, you get an additional discount of 10 to 20%. But I would say for every apartment you book at HomeLike compared to hotels, you save about like 30 to 40%.
Yeah, that's not bad. That isn't bad. I'm sure my co-founders who let me do a lot of these work trips would much prefer me to use this. Obviously, everything's digitalized now. You sort of mentioned how a lot of people are, using less brokers. They want to avoid, I guess, meeting people face to face. With some of our clients like SmartRent and Funnel, these are of the US prop tech businesses. They're saying they're seeing a massive change in, I guess, leasing. Lots of people want to just avoid, having, whether it's an estate agent, broker following them around the flat, someone sort of, pointing out the obvious, like, this is where you can maybe do your work, this is the fridge. What's the sort of different, like, how have you got a sort of percentage of the amount of people that are looking to avoid that, obviously, face-to-face interaction, need for sort of virtual apartment viewings? Any sort of stats behind that?
Yes and no. I think even before Corona, we tried out different things. We even had until last year a lot of our properties where we did 360-degree views, where you could actually fly through the apartment, so on and so forth. Then we also like A/B tested like how that actually works for us. One of the best working things, and I think that's also very obvious, is the quality of pictures. The number of pictures, so how good are you able to show how this apartment really looks like? And also you need to make sure that you're not only making the conversion, so the transaction, you also want to make sure when the tenant is moving in that the apartment looks like what advertised on the website, right? So I think that these two things are very important. Obviously, when someone is, and just think about that, you are relocating to Berlin for 8 months' time, it's a very different emotion you have towards the apartment compared to you have like a 2-night stay in an apartment, right? In Berlin, in a hotel. So understanding that the customer experience is very different compared to a very short stay and a very long stay is something we have obviously a lot of experience in, and I can't give you all the secrets to that. But I think what have worked best for us is really trying to make sure that we have a neutral view on the listing. So what we are not doing is when a supplier wants to pay us more to be listed higher, that's nothing we do. We have a ranking algorithm which is taking into consideration a lot of things, which is the quality of the pictures. We even have image recognition tool where we can understand what are the amenities and the things, the furniture actually on the pictures, does that match with the description and the text, on and so forth. So there's a lot of technology actually involved in order to make sure that the apartment has a high quality. In terms of the personal viewings, I do agree that the longer the stay is, the more relevant a personal viewing can actually be in order to make a decision. For some very, very small portion, we do make exceptions, but it's mainly applied towards group booking. So when a company is booking 50, 60, 70 apartments for a longer term stay, then we also do kind of like viewings, but for the general process, that's not what we have as part of our customer experience.
And I saw recently you just done a partnership, sort of BizAway. What other sort of big partnerships do you have, or are there any sort of future partnerships you might be looking for?
Yeah, partnerships is actually something which is very, very high on our agenda. We do have on the supply side a lot of partnerships when it comes to property management systems, channel managers. We work with SiteMinder, we work with Rentals United, and a couple of others in the industry, which you probably also know, being an expert in prop tech. And there are many, many more, HotelNet Solutions, for example. So there are a lot of tech platforms out there which actually connect towards the supply side. And we have a collaboration with them because it's benefiting both sides, right? With HomeLike, they have an additional marketing channel which is working super well for their suppliers. And we are able to offer instant booking to our customers. So it's a win-win situation. These are the collaborations we like the most. On the demand side, there are also some, you mentioned BizAway. We also work with a lot of travel management companies, relocation firms. And I think that's the beauty of the market and what we do. It's not that we are actually someone as a business who want to be focused on doing everything. We want to partner with companies in various aspects of the business. And when you just think about the value chain of an expatriate, right? Accommodation is one piece. It's a very important one, but there are also visa processes. There's like moving from A to B. There's what is about cultural training in the city, so on and so forth. So there are lots of partnership opportunities there. And this is something we want to explore more going forward. So if anyone is listening on the podcast interested in partnering with HomeLike, very much looking forward to discuss that.
I think, everyone wants a nice, efficient and simple way when they sort of go away to a new country. So any sort of partnerships where you can make it a lot more inclusive is what I'm sure a lot of your customers must look for. It's all about simplifying the process. So let's look, a year or two in the future. Is there any, anything which is coming out in your product, any sort of changes you're working on, or any top secret information you can share with the audience, or what to wait for?
If it's just between the two of us, very happy to do that. But, I think, and want to come back to also your learning during Corona, which is resilience, right?
Yeah.
I think what we also learned is that on the product side, the continuous iteration and improvement of your product is very, very, very important. There are some moonshots you can actually do, some fundamental changes in your product, in your technology. But we also learned that the small product changes can also have a big, big impact. And we have done tons of things in the last couple of months. One topic we are currently rolling out is recurring payment, so that every monthly charge is facilitated by our payment gateway. When we talk about simplifying the process, as you just mentioned. So in the end, the vision is that when you book with HomeLike, that we take care of everything which relates to your stay in the apartment, even kind of like post-booking, prior booking, during booking. And there are tons of things where we focused on. One is recurring payment. The second one could be around deposits. Who needs deposits? And is there actually a better solution than deposits? Because it's an extra financial flow, for example. It's a lot of working capital for corporate clients who need to pay deposits for like 50, 60, or even 70 bookings they have at the same time. Are there better solutions to just like sending over like a 1 month's rent to the supplier or to us in order to cover any damages? What is about insurance packages, so on and so forth? So there are a couple of things we want to dig into in the next couple of quarters and years. But I also believe that we have proven that furnished long-term apartments are resilient to crises like Corona. But now I think taking it even further is how much is furnished apartment, digitization, online process, also benefiting post-Corona. So when we are allowed to travel cross-border, because cross-border is something which has not really returned yet. Like most of the traffic is coming domestically because people are just like not allowed kind of like to travel from the UK to Germany without going into quarantine for like 14 days, right? And this kind of like puts people into a position to maybe not travel to Germany right now, but when this travel restrictions are gone, this will happen again, and we want to be prepared for that. So what keeps us busy at the moment is thinking about how is Corona changing our industry for the long run, and what are things we can do today and prepare for today in order to be ahead of the wave when there's a vaccine and kind of like Corona is somehow under control and managed.
Yeah, well, that's all sounds, well, it's very difficult to predict the future, but I think trying to work out how you can manage the unknown is always going to be difficult, but I'm sure you have a few things up your sleeve. Fortunately, this is bringing us to the end of the Propcast, but Dustin, obviously, thank you so much for joining us. Is there any little bit of, parting, whether it's information you'd love to share with the audience, and also the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I think, and I also mentioned that on a LinkedIn post back in April. I think what Corona was really creating is that that founders are getting more connected. The industry is kind of like joined and trying to overcome this crisis. And what I would actually love when there are any property managers out there, channel managers, property management system providers, founders, people in the prop tech scene, the travel scene, we actually want to reach out just to have a chat or even collaborate or partner or additional supply. Really looking forward to have a chat about that. The easiest way to reach me is through LinkedIn. So I very frequently check out my LinkedIn. So really looking forward to interact with as many people from the industry as possible.
Awesome. Well, look, Dustin, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you after the show.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our special guests. Make sure you visit our website, www.lmre.co.uk, where you can subscribe to our show, or you'll find us on iTunes and Spotify, where all good content is found. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or if you simply just spread the word. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday, and I'll catch you later.
You're listening to a Podcast Company podcast. This was made by Podcast Syndicator, where we help you go from start to grow to making money with your podcast. Let us help you share your message and your voice with the world. Reach out now, Jason at podcastsyndicator.com or Brett at podcastsyndicator.com to find out more. Thank you for listening, and do come back to hear nothing but the best podcasts.